All right, everybody. Today on ASAP Talks Business, we've invited Joe Thompson from Syndigo. And Joe and I talk a lot about the industry. Joe kind of works on a different end, and I'm going to have him introduce himself right now. Um, while I focus on e-commerce in a certain arena, he also focuses on uh, you feel like it's the same type of application, but it's really not. So, Joe, can you come on and explain? We're on your website right now, and I kept this little image up because I want to focus on these little hands together on part of our conversation. So, Joe, can you introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your background and kind of why you and I have these long, in-depth conversations about the automotive industry?
Yeah, so I'm Joe Thomas. I am the automotive solutions manager here at Syndigo, and that is a great image of what we do. We at Syndigo enable commerce, and today in 2020, that's mostly digital commerce. But we mostly work with large retailers, the WalMarts, Amazons, Targets of the world. But we work with any type of recipient in manufacturing. And how Amanda and I ended up meeting was I'm heavily involved in the auto care standards. I've been in the automotive aftermarket for just over 20 years now. Pretty vast experience from working on cars to work at the parts counter and now into the software in this wonderful world of data. And so we came from similar worlds, or sorry, opposite worlds, but had a similar problem of we're just trying to sell parts to consumers.
Right.
So we just started putting our heads together and thinking through some things.
Can you back up for a second? And I think we need to explain to a majority of people out there what auto care is. Because even when I bring a new brand on and we start managing their data, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to get you your auto care, you know, AIAD number, they're like, what is auto care? And so while it feels like half of the industry understands, there is a governing mm, agency that controls some standards. The others don't know who they are, which is odd to me. Right. It makes sense. I mean, and I'm just going to back up for one more second. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen when we started entering into this arena. This was built. Now yours not so much. Yours were more, I think, OE, original manufacturer parts and stuff, and has come into the aftermarket. But what I have assessed is you had a bunch of people who were very enthusiastic about automotive. They built something. They knew how to build something. It was great. People wanted it. They started a business. Whereas other people had business plans and you know it went about it backwards for aftermarket. And so a lot of these guys don't know what was out there because it wasn't important to them. They weren't a part of it. They just built something everyone wanted. So can you explain what auto care actually is and a little bit of the history so people understand that part?
Yeah, so Auto Care is an industry association. So much like SEMA, they are the association mostly for the replacement parts industry, where SEMA is more for the accessories and performance.
Okay.
So very similar, but obviously they do have some unique needs. Auto Care is a giant, and like you said, they are the ones that create the ACES and PIEs standards. So anyone on the SEMA side can be an Auto Care member, and you can contribute to any of these standards. But the bulk of the contributions for the Auto Care standards are coming from the OE replacement world. It's coming from the AutoZones, Advanced O'Reillys, and Napas of the world. Not a lot of input from the SEMA side, unfortunately.
Right. And so where ours kind of match and don't, right? So when we opened ASAP Network, which is about I looked the other day because we're having our virtual show next week, and our first client, our first customer to get data was 5 years and a month ago. So we're 5 years into this, and I had to try and create some standards for e-commerce. And what I struggled with is that while everyone was telling me prior to this, well, it's aces and pies, Amanda, it's industry standard, Amanda, because I didn't grow up in it and I didn't understand it. When I did do the research into what is this aces and pies you speak of, I'm like, okay, well, I get the ACEs portion. I truly do. You need to know when I'm doing data uh, and fitment, quite a bit of time a manufacturer will explain to me this fits this year, make, and model with maybe this configuration. And I have to say, not based on auto care, it doesn't, right? And so I understand that, and I'm not complaining about that. But then when I was introduced to the PI standard, oh my goodness, I'm like, what are you doing? Because my whole vision was very tunneled to e-commerce, and that meant the search engines and all the different platforms that are out there. Now we build in Drupal, and so there's Magentos and Volusions and all this stuff that wasn't customized to be able to take the information from pies, which is the majority of, while you have the big boys, the majority of the space out there is covered by smaller, and I don't mean, you know, smaller in comparison, right? Down to one-man teams who have a plug and play website. And everything I saw on the standards, I'm like, well, that's really 100% against what it needs to be if we're going to be talking to the consumer. And even in talking to auto care, they have admittedly told me, yeah, well, we're not quite sure how to handle this because it wasn't really built for the applications that I'm using, right? And so from attributes that they acknowledge and the wording, you and I talked about this the other day, it's really difficult for me when I am trying to present product. Sometimes it takes me hours just to kind of get what we're going to call it, because so many different styles. We were just talking about a brand I was bringing on, and in auto care under the part type, um, one said air suspension this, and the other said suspension air this, and I'm like, nah, I'd like some consistency, but I'm not getting it from that. And so I'd like you to take that for a second, because you said some things the other day about what that was really meant to be and actually what people are trying to use it for. And I think that'll help people understand some of our struggles. Can you elaborate on what you and I talked about the other day as far as those part types?
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of set it straight, is Aces and Pies was never designed for e-commerce. That is not what it's designed for. It is not what it should be used for, even though there is a large portion of the industry that is trying to use it. It's not what it's for. Aces and Pies, it was for a standardized, in air quotes, way to transmit data from one party to another. It was not meant to be a consumer-facing data set at all. But that was over a decade ago when they were creating this. So they weren't even thinking about e-com.
So I want to ask you a question, though, because what you just said is 100% how I feel. And yet, because we were the pioneers of e-commerce data load sheets, like pioneers, we got arrows in our back, and still do to this day, trying to convince people who are absolutely 100% devoted to, you must use this. This is our standards. I don't care if it doesn't work. It is what we do. And I'm like, I am not trying to fight you. I want standards. I need them as well in my data, but this doesn't work. And for you who come from this side to say that, why do you think you and I agree upon so much, and so much of the other part of the industry, some very big, data companies out there that are saying aces and pies is it. It's perfect. It's what we want. Where's the disconnect there? What am I saying wrong to them that they're not going, yes, we agree?
So I get that too, where people say just put it in the standards. I'm like, all right, cool. So I put it in the industry standards. I probably know them a little more than they do because I'm very active in the work groups. And they're like, well, this isn't in the standard way. That's not how we've gotten it before. I'm just like, well, here's the documentation. You know, I know that we're meeting industry standards. But what happened is the standards, again in air quotes, give you so many variable ways to do the same thing. So it's a loose set of rules that are masquerading around as a standard. So
Right.
when you say you want it in the standard, well, which way do you want it in the standard? Because again, I work mostly with large retailers, so when I send pies to AutoZone, it's a different pies file that I'm sending to Advance, which is a different pies file that I'm sending to O'Reilly's, which is a different. Again, every one that I send out is different. When I worked at a previous manufacturer, even on the ACES side, I was creating over 24 files per month in ACES because of variations that the recipients needed in their data.
So I just want to touch on this for a second. So how do they call it standards if everyone's saying, well, I want it in standards, but I want it in standards the way we understood standards and we built our technology around it. And so if everyone's trying to fit it into this square box, but everyone's box is skewed a little bit, then is that really standards? Is that really, and do you really think that we ever, I mean, what a monumental freaking task to go back and say, I understand everyone when we didn't have roads and you were out doing this, you built your road this way, and it is a road, but it's not really, how do you go back to these massive legacy things they built to make this work and go, we now have decided all of it's bad and needs to be repaved, and here it is. You're never going to get any of them to agree upon that. And so what is the standards for if you can't get enough of the consumer or the people providing that information to use it and understand it? What are we doing?
Yeah, so just remember that when this was created, I think this actually started to be created over 15 years ago, but actually launched about 10, just over a decade ago. So at the time, this was a standardization. It was a more standardized way than what the previous legacy method was. So at the time, yeah, I agree. It probably was a standardization. But what's happened is from over the years, not much has changed. E-com is blown up. The SKU proliferations are just exponentially growing. The vehicle configurations are exponentially growing, and we've never caught up. This actually got brought up at ACPN. It's something I presented about. ACPN is AutoCare's catalog conference. There was about 800 people there this year. It's a pretty big deal, and a lot of people are obviously interested in this space. But we brought up that we started talking about interconnectivity and updating, bringing stuff up to a consumer friendly facing uh, standard over a decade ago. And literally, the standards have not changed in any way, shape, or very, very little. It has not really moved towards that consumer-friendly standardization in over a decade, even though they reckon a small group of people recognized it over a decade ago.
So we could go down that rabbit hole, and we have on many phone calls. I want to step back for a second, and I want to look at solving or addressing the issue and keeping focus on what our goal is. And you and I think 100% agree upon this. Everyone I talk to has a little bit different information, or they want to fight about something, or none of what you do or I do or the none of the big, there's only one thing that matters, right? And everything we do needs to be focused around that consumer getting that product in their hand, because that's all that matters. And so while we are building from, hey, your system can take this, and so that's the way it should be, I really feel like we have completely lost track of what the goal of this was, right? So kind of like, let's get pizza because we're all hungry. But by the time you ask 800 people to agree on a pizza, you have completely forgotten why you needed that pizza, because we're hungry. And so it's taken so long for them to agree. Now we're starving, right? And when we finally get it, it's something we all can't eat because you let someone make a decision on that pizza. Well, I would like chicken salad on that pizza. Well, no one else can eat that. I mean, it can't be, that someone is controlling this, and 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 if they are, we have to somehow 100% every time we make a change go, did this help get this manufacturer's product A, on a website, B, for a search engine to understand, was it easy, was it quick, was there enough information, and did that make a difference on the consumer? And it feels like to me we spend so much time talking about everything but that consumer, when that consumer is the only reason any of us are here. And we forget about that. We let our egos, well, we are an industry agency and we know. And I'm like, I don't care, right? We're not as big as some of these people, but because we build e-commerce websites, we absolutely 1000% can immediately see the difference between one type of product information and the time it takes to get it onto a website and the way the files are structured, as opposed to, boom, in 10 minutes you can have an entire lineup and it's talking to the search engines and the consumers are going, yeah, I like it. So how do we fix something if we can't get everyone to agree? It's not about you. It's not about the road you build. It's about, does that road jump into the consumer, and is it something the consumer can go, yes, I will pay for that? So how do we do that as an industry when it's so segregated out there and people don't want to change?
Yeah, sadly, I feel the answer is somebody needs to build it because, not to completely bash auto care, but they they have a lot of very antiquated and long processes to get anything to pass, and it's very monolithic updates, and takes years to pass through some things.
Right.
And just remember this: their goal is to make sure that they are taking care of their industry association members,
Right.
not the consumer. The consumer is not an association member. They are trying to not break systems. So if
Right.
one of our receivers can't accept special characters or something odd like that, they make sure that there are rules in place that it doesn't break the association members' systems, and that the technology of their industry, the members, can work within these standards. So you get a lot of that input, and the people that are making those decisions are 100-plus-year-old companies.
Right.
This is a 100-plus-year-old association. They have very old systems. You would think that the big guys had the latest and greatest, but I mean, in reality, they don't. They have a lot of time, money, and effort put into homegrown systems, or maybe some older systems, and they really have not invested in the latest and greatest. So the association's stance, obviously, is to take care of their members, and they don't want to break and cost these, the retailers or the manufacturers money to force them to upgrade their systems. So it's a catch-22. If you don't force them to upgrade, they're not going to upgrade.
You
So
know, Joe, it's weird because this whole industry runs on margins, right? Um, Margin this, margin that. And um, I see a lot of frustration from manufacturers I work with for that same reason you just spoke about. Why can't they use this file? Um, I thought you said anyone can use this file. Well, they can. The information's there. The headers are different. Or, they want it on theirs, not because ours isn't better. It's because their system requires them to manually put something in that way. Manually put something in that way, right? And so what all these receivers who are like, do it my way, aren't taken into consideration is every man hour that has to go into that file to change it a little bit for them. Every time you click a button, um, uh, you invite errors, right? Every time a human does that, because there's no real, here's training, learn it, because it's going to work across the board. They don't, because there really is no way to do it. So everyone's kind of figuring out, oh, well, they want that. Copying and pasting is a bad thing, right? And so the manufacturers don't get it. They don't understand. They get frustrated, so they stop doing it. They're like, forget it. I'm over it. Because it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's not cheap, right? Your standards, my goodness, auto care doesn't make it inexpensive for someone to join and doesn't make it easy for someone to train. You guys all get certified, right? How long does it take you guys to get certified? A long time. But a lot of people, unlike you, when I talk to some of those that are certified, boy, they want this to work. It is important for them because they've spent a lot of time wrapping their mind around this. But when I talk to other people, go, I want aces and pies, and I give it to them, like, what is this, right? Well, that's aces and pies. I can't use this file. They're asking for something. They don't even know what they're asking for. Um, it's overwhelming, and building it, like you said, I tried. I can't do it alone, right? And I tried. A couple years back, I built a site. I called Edge. I called it E-commerce Data Group Exchange. I invited all the big receivers on my side. Of course, I didn't invite Walmart or AutoZone or whatnot. I invited the Summits, the 4 Wheel Parts, the Car IDs, the Auto Anythings. Um, I invited them all, and I said, look, I'm building the data you're using, and I see it, the application of it on the websites I build. So I need to address some things, simple things to start with. Powder coat, powder coated, powder space coat, capital C. It's all over the board. And so if you're using that on a website, that is really screwing up the consumer on how they choose if you're using it as a navigation tool. And so I had them vote, and I said the majority wins. And we voted on some things. It's now powder coat, one word, no capital C. That's how I build it now. And I'm like, um, I did my best. Gray and gray. Is it GRAY, GREY? While it seems like such stupid little things, Joe, it isn't when the application renders on a website and you're like, sort by color. How does a consumer know the difference between GREY and GRAY? And does it really matter in the automotive part? No, not really. You know what I mean? And so I tried that, but it was just overwhelming. I can't do it alone. And if I reach out to other people, they push me back to the standards. I spoke with AutoCare about their suspension system, their attributes for suspension, because one of my receivers said, Amanda, we need it to really, really be, standards. And I said, well, you're not using this. Yes, we are. Like, no, you're not. You're calling out 3 of the 23 standards that auto care has. And when I go to my suspension manufacturers and I say, I'm going to tell you 23 terms, and you're going to explain to me if you even understand A, what I'm asking you for, B, if you will give it to me, and C, do you think a consumer needs this information to make a decision to buy the product? And all of them said, the 3 of them, right? 3 out of the 23 standards that AutoCare put in there for the manufacturers to learn are irrelevant, or they won't give it to you, or they don't feel like that has anything to do with getting a consumer to purchase it. So when I talked to AutoCare, they said, well, just give us your new standards and we'll put them on there. And I said, no, because you're just going to lay them on top of the 23. And if you really want these manufacturers, I mean, I want to help the manufacturers, but I really don't feel like, Joe, they should be prisoned with me because I'm the only one that can do it. I really feel like we need to educate them so they understand it. But if I show them that tool and they aren't going to use it, or it's not going to be used correctly, then we still have crap on the other side. And so you were talking about someone the other day. Is there anyone out there that's willing to get together, and who is he going to get together with, right? Everyone you ask is going to go our way, our legacy. How do we resolve this? Because right now, again, that consumer's sitting there going, hi, I'd like to buy a part, and we're like, hang on, we're busy talking about how to get it to you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So a couple things to answer some of those things is, when consumers are going through and making their buying decisions, they're going through what's called a search taxonomy.
Right.
So they're searching for a part to purchase. And what AutoCare has created with all these part terms is called a classification taxonomy. So those two things don't always compute. So a classification taxonomy should not be used for a search taxonomy. And for a classification taxonomy, that the PCDB is, which is the AutoCare standard, that was really designed mostly by manufacturers. And it's going to be engineers. Engineers want to be exact. They want to make sure that their part is portrayed exactly the way that they designed it or engineered it, because they're very proud of it. So that's why there's a lot of, let's just say, more granular than what we would expect. And the manufacturers care about this more than anybody because it's their part, they're proud of it. But what they never took into account, like we kept on saying, is what is the consumer? What do they know? They don't necessarily know the super technical thing. They just know that, hey, these are brake pads for my car. I don't need to know, is it a brake pad kit, brake pad set, brake pad, I don't know, whatever else. They come up with all these very exact terms, and they define these very exact terms within their standards. I'm like, cool. So where can a consumer find that information to do their research before they purchase their product? Well, we're not consumer facing. Hey,
Right.
that's literally the answer I keep on getting. Well, we're not consumer facing. I'm like, all right. Well, this is an issue. Again, this is why you and I ended up talking in the first place. Was
Right.
you know they're going through and using a classification taxonomy because it's very exact, it's very technical, and they're trying to use it for a consumer-facing search taxonomy. And that is, going back to the very beginning of this, that is not what this was designed for. PIEs, and ACES are both based on the PCDB, the part classification database. And it even calls it out in the name of it. It's a classification database.
Right.
So that's why there's more granular terms. I don't know if you've ever worked with VMRS, but it's for heavy duty. It's very similar. It's very granular. It's very exact and has very specific needs. And that's so that you can classify your product properly. Now, each one of not all of the retailers have created their own search taxonomy, and that is, that's their secret sauce.
Sure.
They're taking this classification and taxonomy and mapping it out to one to many or many to one, depending upon what they feel is the most efficient way to search for the products. And that is what it was designed for. If you talk to anyone at AutoCare, they will tell you that you should not in any way, shape, or form natively be using aces and pies on a consumer-facing website.
So a couple of things I want to bring up. On ASAP, I have to go through these manufacturers and clearly identify what the part type is. A lot of times I'll see a data sheet that is given to me from some other data company who are using the part term. And so I spend a lot of time going, yeah, you are saying it's axle, but it's not axle. While it should be a child of axle, it's an axle seal. And so I really try to pull that out. And so the receivers of our data, a lot of times, they struggle with it. And they're like, well, that shouldn't be here. That should be here under that. And I'm like, I can't make you all happy, right? Sometimes I get a lot of pushback from a manufacturer when I put it in a certain part type, and they're like, no, we want it here. And I'm like, but that's not what it is. Well, that's what it is. So I get a lot of personal, again, they look at it as, well, it's on our website, and again, their website only has their parts. And so I'm trying to make everyone happy, and I'm trying to give these smaller to medium-sized dealers a format for their website, but it's all over the place when I have one manufacturer who goes, I want it in this part term, but yeah, the other four I have in this part term. So your parts aren't going to show up in the same place. And then my receivers are going to go, I went to here and I don't see that part, because those manufacturers blatantly told me I could not do that with theirs. And I can't get them to agree. Joe, it gets frustrating.
It doesn't matter what part type, what part of the industry you're in. Yeah, it's frustrating, and the retailers or the recipients of this data, if a lot of times if there's not a part term, they just shove it in something similar. Like I had recently, one of our clients had a torch fuel, just like camp gas, map gas, something like
Right.
that. And they were like, "Hey, I got to get a pies file out to so and so, one of the major receivers." And so I went through. He was not as familiar with pies. We get a lot of CPG type customers coming in, delivering to some of these crossover items to the automotive retailers. And so I started going through the PCB. I'm like, let me just find him the closest term to what he needs. And it was like fuel, or I forget what it actually was, but there wasn't an exact term for what he had for one of those propane or MAP gas cylinders. So I found fuel or torch, something like that. It was close. So I was like, before we put this in here, let's ask the retailer that you're trying to deliver to what they currently have this item classified as. And because I know that there's some variability there. And they told me that it was welding equipment. I'm like, okay, that makes no sense. I look at the attributes. So the moral of that story is sometimes the retailers just shove it in with something else that's in that planogram,
Right.
so that they can just keep moving instead of doing it the right way and saying, hey, we don't have a proper term for this. AutoCare, can you create a fuel cylinder part term? And again, what's happening is the manufacturer of this product doesn't know any better, just like you said.
Right.
They're just trying to do the best they can with what the information presented at them. And this major retailer is not willing to contribute to the standards to make it right. They just want to get parts on the shelf and sell them.
Right.
So it's unfortunately really left on people like you and I to catch those things, because in the manufacturer's eyes, oh, the retailer gave me a way out. That's what I'm going to do. I'm like, yeah, but it's not right.
Here's
I go,
the
it's really
problem,
not
Joe.
right.
Joe, you I feel have much more authority and knowledge on this. When someone says you make the decision, Amanda, I freak out. I'm like, me? I'm making the decision. I'm a freaking web developer, right? I don't even know what that part does in that vehicle, right? I have no knowledge. I'm going to flip a coin and I'm going to make a decision for the industry right now. It's very overwhelming for me, right? I'll call out, I call Summit a lot and I'm like, hey, and they're very good. I'm like, look, I got a part type. I don't know where to put it as a child, and well, we put it over here and we call it that. I'm like, same thing, but that's not really what this is, right? And of course, the miscellaneous, that is a pile of what do you mean miscellaneous? No one
Yeah.
went online and searched Google. Show me miscellaneous, right? Or show me accessories. Accessories, what is an accessory? Well, it could be a bajillion things. So you're going to give them a site that has 2,700 pages of accessories, and they're going to be able to figure out. Well, I mean, so it blows me away. So now I have a question for you. If this is broken, and everyone knows it's broken, even the organization who created it, who I have had them say, we know it's broken. It's a glorified price sheet. We don't know what to do. Why have we not even investigated international? So I have some brands that, I'm like, hey, I can't get you ACEs on this part because it was never made in the US, Mexico, or Canada. And while I could manually put it in there, people like, the bigger receivers are like, nope, if it's not ACEs and you don't give me that ACEs vehicle ID number, I will eject the file. And I'm like, all right. So why are we not taking a look at how international is doing it? And since when this was done, maybe we didn't do as much international, but Joe, international is a big business. I've got a lot of receivers coming in from Australia and Europe and South America, and they don't, you know, we don't conform with the rest of the planet on this stuff. Shouldn't we try and adopt a planetary so that if we have a manufacturer or a receiver of data that wants to be in Abu Dhabi or something, that we can give them everything and not just, oh, sorry, dude, uh, sucks to be you because your vehicles were never made in United States or Canada, right? We can't help you.
And so we're also a global organization. And as I kind of teed it off in the very beginning, is we're multi-vertical. So some of the problems that we're talking about here, specifically in automotive, actually exist in other verticals.
Okay.
And but in like CPG, for instance, there is a global standard that they use. We in automotive have not adopted that standard. That standard is for e-com. It is consumer friendly. We just don't typically use that. It's a GS1 standard. Um, but globally, Tech Alliance does have a more standardized global system. They are in everywhere except for North America. They are dabbling in Mexico. They do have tables for the United States and Canada. But this is, without getting into too much depth, it is a political struggle between two big powerhouse industry associations. TechDoc, based in Germany, is owned by all of the major auto parts suppliers. Again, the big boys all own this, so they're the ones dictating this. And then we have the same or similar ownership here in the United States. The difference really is the retailers. The AutoZones, the Advance, the Rileys, the Napas, so on and so forth of the world that actually move the parts here in the United States have such a big voice that we're not gonna just say, oh, we're not gonna use that anymore. We're gonna use the Tech Alliance standards. Um, that
Right.
because of it is a big political struggle, and ultimately it comes down to somebody's going to lose some revenue, and if somebody's going to lose revenue, everyone just stops and like, no, we're not doing it.
So here's where I'm going to close this out. I feel like if we can't come together as an industry, someone like Amazon is just going to take this from out from underneath us, because Amazon is very consumer facing and they're making their own rules. They're not waiting for auto care to come up with something. They're going, hey, this consumer's looking for cat food. So you know what? We're going to call it cat food. And this consumer needs to know this. And so you know what? We're going to tell them that. And we're going, hang on, we got to decide, is it cat food or cat foods? Is it, we're so tied up in hang on that while we're fighting, these other people are just taking our lunch money, and they're going, yeah, you guys are idiots. We're focused on the consumer, and you guys are focused on your ego. So we're getting all your sales, and we're making this whole taxonomy and this whole relationship thing. We don't care what you guys are doing, and it kind of makes me feel stupid sometimes. I'm just
Oh,
saying.
that you're 100%. Again, this is not exclusive to the automotive industry. This is something we deal with in CPG, grocery, hard goods. Lowe's and Home Depot don't agree. I mean, just like Advanced and AutoZone don't agree.
Right.
They have their own proprietary way of classifying a hammer or a screwdriver. Hey, it's a hammer. Everyone knows it's a hammer. Well, this one's way more elaborate hammer or something like that. Or a drill or a saw. Again, it's not exclusive to us. It's an ongoing problem. But ultimately, how do you convey your recipients how they want it is really, unfortunately, how you have to bend. I think they have an illusion that a PIES file or an ACES file is actually standard, and they ask for an ACES or PIES file. Hey, I just handed this one to AutoZone and they took it fine. Now I'm going to send it to my local warehouse distributor, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like this." Well, Advance took it; they're following the standards.
Right.
There's so many versions of the standards. It's not exclusive to us, and that's really why people like us exist. A middleware like us, like that's what we do.
Right.
We take in a single source of truth, we transform it out to all these different recipients' needs. I mean, that's like the core functionality of our product. And there's other people doing it as well in other industries, in our industry, because there's a need for it. Is it ideal? No, but we also need to stop thinking that ACES and PIES is a consumer-facing standard, or a standard in general. It's not. It's just a loose set of rules.
So, Joe, I would like you to just give your contact information. So anyone out here who would like to talk more on the ACES and PIES, I mean, Joe is extremely knowledgeable, where, of course, for me, I fly by the seat of my pants. I'm like, hey, I think a consumer needs to know this. I'm not waiting for any organization. I'm not dealing with it. I'm just, it's there. So I'm kind of a renegade, but my renegade ways help a certain target, my receivers on ASAP. You have a lot to offer someone in a much higher level than probably I do, and maybe a lot of these people just didn't know anything about what you just said and would like to talk to you. Is there a way that you could share your email with them and or your phone number in case some of our viewers go, I'd like to talk to this Joe guy. Sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, for sure. So Syndigo is spelled kind of weird. It's here on the screen, but my email is joe.thomas@syndigo.com. And you can reach me on my cell at 419-276-0415. And I encourage you to reach out to me And if you have or unsure a part term, or you feel that there is a new part term or a better part term or a consolidation of a part term, I'm happy to get you in touch with the right people so we can make that change, or help you understand why another part term is better. We could talk through it. I do this often for people. I obviously help my clients, but I'm also an industry person and willing to help anybody that wants to learn, or at least point them in the right direction if I don't have the answer.
And I appreciate that. Again, you and I work kind of different segments, but we still have the same needs and the same frustrations. And I just thought maybe some of our listeners would be interested to know this is a bigger problem than just let's call Joe or Amanda and have them fix it, right? Man, we know there's a problem,
It's
and
not going to get fixed unless people start speaking up. I mean, they don't know there's a problem until a specific problem until you bring it to their attention, and I'm willing to be that conduit to bring it to their attention.
well, you're awesome. You're awesome, man. So, I really appreciate your time this morning. I understand you're a busy man. I've been trying to get you on the phone for a couple of weeks now, and I catch you always at the wrong time. So, you're awesome, and I hope the listeners kind of enjoyed listening to the fact that, oh yeah, there's a problem, but there are people out there trying to figure it out for you because we understand you want to sell that part. Um, we're working on it. So, Joe, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon, okay?